Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of Not the Worsted Knitting Podcast. My name is Michelle, and I am the knitter and knitwear designer behind Mishi Fraz Knits. In today's episode, we are back to a normal podcast. If you watched last week, then you'll know that I brought out all of my languishing WIPs, and it was really good to bring them out, see some things I'd forgotten about. It's funny because I'd been lately wondering where all my barber cords went. And then I pulled out all of my projects and realized, oh, that's where they were. They were on all of the different projects that I haven't worked on in months. So that was really good to go through, decide what I wanted to rip out and maybe either reuse the yarn for something else or give away, which I did end up doing with some of my yarn. And then there were a couple of projects that I realized I wanted to actually work on or redo. So thank you for everybody who left me a comment. I had a lot of people give me helpful tips on things that I could do to work on projects that I'm not super motivated to work on. If you hear some whining right now, I believe Tuna and Bagel are wrestling over by the door. So we have French doors there. They're normally open when it's sunny like this, but when I'm filming, I close the curtains just so it doesn't kind of blow out in the background. And I think they are fighting for a little bit of sunlight in whatever patch they can get it. So anyway, today I'm gonna talk about some of the things I've been working on, but I will start by chatting about what I'm wearing, which you might recognize this because I talked about this several episodes ago, but this is my Confetti Crop top. This is a pattern by Knitatude. It is $7.91 on Ravelry, and it is a top-down lace yoke summer tee. Apologies if there's some noise in the background. They're wrestling. So yeah, it's a top-down yoke lace tee, and it's a crop top, as you can see. So it doesn't take a whole lot of yarn, and it uses fingering weight yarn. The pattern recommends that you use a US 5 needle, which is 3.75 millimeters. And I knit this according to pattern. I got gauge no problem with a fingering weight yarn, which I used Meeker Street, and it is, what is it? The base is called the Flower Shop. That is their, I believe it's 100% superwash merino base. And the colorway is a little petty, which I'm gonna move up so you can see. Look at that. Look at those little pops of color. I felt like it was kind of a confetti yarn, which I thought was fitting with something called a confetti crop top. So I thought this was a really good mix for yarn and pattern. This yarn is incredibly soft. I know merino in general is typically very soft, but it's so soft. It doesn't feel too hot. And also, so far, knock on wood, I haven't had any pilling issues. I guess maybe that's because of the superwash nature. I'm actually not really sure. I do wear this a decent amount, so maybe over time it will pill, but so far it's been great and it's held up really well. I love this top. I wear it all the time. Just for reference, so you know, I knit the smallest size, and the size range is 32 inches to 54-inch bust, which I am surprised it stops at 54 inches, but I'm suspecting it's because of the ease range. So the pattern recommends 9 to 12 inches of positive ease. So I don't know if maybe that's why, maybe on the larger sizes, they don't recommend as much ease, and that's part of it. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, so I knit the smallest size. I have a 34-inch bust, so you can see I still have quite a bit of positive ease in here. I absolutely love it. Wear it a lot, wear it in the summer. Even though it's merino, it's cool enough because it's so open, because there's lace. So I never feel like I'm overheating or like it's too hot, which is great. If I were to knit this again, there are two modifications I would make. Wow, I don't know if can you see that? I think they might be like right there, but they are making so much noise right now. There they are. There are the troublemakers. Yep, now they're going behind the curtain. This is It's like they wait until I'm filming and decide to just create chaos. Trying not to lose track of where I am. Okay, so yeah, I would make 2 modifications if I were to do this again. The first one is just that I would make it a little bit longer. I knit this according to her recommended length, which it's super cute. Like I really love it, and I don't have any issues with that. I think it looks great, but for me personally, I have to make sure I wear something really high-waisted. Otherwise, you know, like if I were to raise my arm, then, you know, you might have some exposed skin. And I mean, it's fine, but for my personal comfort, I do maybe wish I'd knit it even just like another inch would probably be enough. And then the other modification I would make is, it's actually a little bit less obvious now than it was in a previous video. But if I were to do this again, I would actually probably do a couple of decreases right after the lace on the sleeves. Not anywhere else, just on the sleeves. If you can see, you can probably see pretty well there if you ignore the cats in the background. It kind of bells out after the lace. And it's a little bit better now that I blocked it differently. Before, when I blocked it flat, it was actually quite obvious. You would see it like it just really popped out. Now, one thing I've done to block sleeves that I really like is I will use pipe insulation, which you can just pick up. I just picked up at like Ace Hardware. You can get it at any hardware store though. And it's sort of like pool noodles, but the reason I liked the pipe insulator was because it was actually a little bit thinner. Sometimes pool noodles can be quite thick, and I was worried, I don't want to stretch out my sleeves. I just want to have the sleeves be able to sit on something round to where it's not gonna get that really hard crease. And that has worked really well for me, actually. Some people have recommended you can also use things like paper towel rolls or toilet paper rolls, which those would probably work too. The only thing I would do if you do something like that is maybe cover the cardboard just so it doesn't soak up all the moisture. That's another thing I like about the pipe insulator, is that it's not really holding on to any moisture. Okay, I'm really curious to see how much of that noise is going to come through. I'm really hoping it's not that crazy on your end. So yeah, once I did that and blocked them with the pipe insulator, I actually felt like the bell wasn't quite as obvious, but I still think this would benefit from maybe a little bit, like just a couple of decreases, just to keep, I think there's something about the lace weight, or not the lace weight, but the lace work that you do here, and then when you have that same amount of stitches, but it's all stockinette, the stockinette ends up reading a little bit wider. And so it just kind of pulls, it just bells out just a little bit. But those are the only modifications I would make if I were to do that again. Otherwise, I mean, this is a lovely pattern. It's super quick. I think I knit it up in like 2 weeks. Like, it was really fast. I think, did I knit this 2 summers ago? I think I knit it 2 summers ago. And, you know, I grab for this a lot when I want something just kind of like open and airy. Really, really easy construction. I believe I cast on with a long tail cast on, and then you just do kind of garter stitch for a couple of rows to give it a little bit of texture, which I think actually looks really nice and clean. It makes a nice effect when you have kind of more of a boat neck. And then I believe you just knit for a bit, and then you do a series of rapid increases here before you start working on the lace panel. And then it's just a very small amount of lace, and then it's just stockinette. So it is quick. This is a very quick pattern, and I would definitely knit this again. So highly recommend it. This has been a great top for me. So it's a perfect top to wear in the summer, finally with some sunshine. So it was a good day for this guy. So yeah, so that's what I'm wearing, and why don't we why don't we move on to my finished objects, which I actually have one. Amazingly enough, this almost didn't happen, and I was frantically working until like mid-morning today to make sure this was finished, because I really wanted to get these done. So if you watched my Languishing Whips video, then you will know that I brought out some Viking socks that I had started for Thomas last year. they ended up not fitting after I knit 2 at a time and almost finished them. And I just completely lost steam, shoved them in the back of the closet and forgot about them. Pulled them out in the last video and was like, I really want to get these done. And also his birthday is coming up. I should just do it. So I ended up, not the same day, but the next day, I went to the yarn store, picked up more of that denim yarn, and I immediately got to work. And so at first I was trying to keep these socks a surprise because I was like, oh, I can do it. I can get these to him on his birthday and it'll be a fun surprise. He won't even know I was working on them. But then, you know, it's his birthday, so he took some days off. And I was like, I'm never gonna actually do these if I try to keep this a surprise, they're never gonna get done. Like, he's gonna get these next year. So I let him know what was going on and he was super excited about it, and I just started working on it around him. I finished one sock on his actual birthday, and then I finished the other one today. So we're technically 3 days late, but it's okay because this was totally unexpected. But yeah, so Viking socks are done. Look at those guys. Look at how fun they are. I am so relieved that these are done. So I'll just let you guys see that up close. Hopefully that's the good side. There's always like a good side and a bad side with socks, you know? I try not to show the beginning of round side because that's where you get the weird jogs and things, but yeah, I think that looks pretty good. I'm so happy these are done. Yeah, that video last week really lit a fire under me to get things moving because, like, I was really excited about these. He was really excited about these, and it was such a shame. It was really just because I was so annoyed that I had done the wrong size and gotten so far. And I'll admit, the ships are really what takes a long time because you've got a lot of space in between, so you have to carry your floats a lot in a lot of the ship motif. Everything else moves pretty quickly. Now, I'm gonna bring out the originals just because there are some modifications that needed to be done. So the originals are here, and you will see, if you remember, they are pretty close to being done. The originals were 72 stitches. They were on US 1 needles, which are 2.25 millimeters. And these fit me great with the exception of the heel. So the heel, obviously, this whole sock was meant to be for Thomas. So it's 72 stitches, which is normally his size, and his heel depth. Obviously, this was too narrow for him to fit into, but they fit me well with the exception that the heel is just a little bit long. So my plan is these are going to be for me, and I'm just going to redo this heel for my size, and then eventually they'll be perfect. There were a few modifications I made just based on knowing more about Thomas's sock preferences and also wanting to get them done in time. So, all right, what did I do? So for this guy, this is 80 stitches, and it is also on US 1.5 needles, which are 2.5 millimeters. I actually ended up, the first sock I knit to the heel portion, had him try it on, and this was actually like a few days ago, after I'd let him know I was knitting him socks for his birthday. I actually started one through the heel. All I did was go up a needle size, which is what I was saying I was gonna do. And I was skeptical, but I wanted to try it because that's typically what works for me with colorwork socks. They were still too tight. And by too tight, I mean like he still couldn't even, like, I was worried he was going to actually rip the colorwork. And it's really, again, it's these ships. They get quite, the ships with all of the carried floats, there's just something about it. There's really not a lot of give there. So I didn't even bother trying to block them because I knew they were too tight, and if they're too tight, he's not gonna wear them because he's gonna be worried about ruining them. So I ripped that out. But I was so motivated to get these done for his birthday that I just immediately restarted the next day. And so I went up to a US 1.5 or 2.5 millimeter I maintained that larger needle size, but then I also went up to 80 stitches because I was like, I am going to get these to fit, and there's just like, there's no way I'm doing this again. So we're doing all the things. And it worked. It worked. Thank God. If these didn't work, then these were gonna get thrown in the fire. But because I went up to 80 stitches, I did have to do some modifications. Now, again, this chart motif, this is not something I came up with. This is from a book from Mary Jane Mucklestone. What is it? I think it's 150 Scandinavian Motifs is the name of the book. And so the original motif, it's really not much different. This worked out perfectly for 72 stitches with the way these are all spaced out. And I tried to get that same motif to work on 80 stitches, and it wasn't working out evenly. And so after a bit of playing around with the chart, I found that the best thing I could do was actually shrink the width of the ship just a little bit. So the ship is a little bit, it's not quite as wide. And then also the wave, I needed to add 1 stitch to the width. So the wave, instead of being just kind of like a round arcing effect, there is an extra stitch there to kind of create more of a linear effect. And those are the modifications I needed to do to get this chart to still work on 80 stitches. And I don't think it's that obvious. And if you're looking at this, you might notice there's one other thing that I didn't do. Now on this guy, you will see that on this row, the ship's windows and the little shield are in this lighter color. And I opted to just do the camel color. And I chose to do this because I know that when you're working 3 colors at once in color work, that can also kind of make the tension even tighter. And not just that, I was on a deadline and that was really slowing me down. And so my thinking was that I would just do this, and then I can duplicate stitch the white on those rows. But when I showed it to Thomas, he was like, I don't even notice a difference and it doesn't really bother me. So I'm probably not even gonna do that. He's pretty happy with these, so I think I'm just gonna leave them. And so yeah, these are not blocked yet. So I suspect these will stretch just a little bit more once I block them. I do still have to weave in ends on one of them. So like I said, I finished one on his birthday, and then this other one, I literally finished the heel and the toe this morning because I did not want to film this unless I had both of them done. So let me just pull this off and we'll see. So there are some ends to weave in. Yeah, we've got a little bit of work to do. But it goes by pretty quickly. So this really, like, I know this looks like a lot, but it's fine. So yeah, so you can check on the floats if that's your thing. I know some people like to see floats. And then I just need to weave all of these guys in, and then these socks can be blocked and they will officially be ready to wear. So he should be able to wear these in a couple of days, and that is really exciting. I'm so happy that these are done. Like, you don't even know how relieved I am to have these done. Like, there was a while where I was wondering if this was ever gonna happen. So so yeah, this is great. These are done. Oh, there is one other modification I made, and it's just that, let me tuck in those ends. I made the cuff a little bit shorter. So I think this was a 20 stitch cuff 2x2. I modified it to be a 12 stitch cuff. And then you'll see here, this is where where I've put the marker to do my afterthought heel. And I actually originally had done 2 full chart repeats. In this one, I just opted to do 1 because one thing I've learned about how Thomas likes to wear his socks is he actually doesn't like them super long. He prefers them a little bit on the shorter side. So, and that worked out well because that was way less knitting for me to have to do. So Viking socks are done. if you are curious, the yarn I used is Cascade Heritage, and that is a fingering weight 75/25 sock yarn. And the colors I used, the blue is denim, the lighter blue is anise, the ship's color is camel, and then the whitish, the like white gray, is called limestone. And I'm really excited to see how this blocks out and how he likes wearing them, because this yarn was a dream to work with and it is so much cheaper than I remember. So I ran to the yarn store as soon as I finished last week's video and was determined to do this. Like the next day when they were open, I went there, got the yarn, was so excited, and couldn't believe that the whole like 100-gram skein of sock yarn was like $11.95 US. And I don't know, I guess I've been buying a lot of indie dyed yarn lately, but I was expecting it to be more like 20 something. So for it to be $12, that's pretty great. And obviously the denim blue, that's the color I needed to buy more of, and that's the dominant color in these. I still have 51 grams remaining after doing this. So I still have enough to make a whole other set of socks, no problem. And that's great for 12 bucks. Like, I am not mad about that. And then, you know, I've hardly used any of the other colors, so I'm gonna have a lot of that left over, which is great because I love color work socks and I will definitely be using that. So really excited to see how these feel after blocking, because I might start using Cascade Heritage more often for socks. I mean, granted, I have a lot of sock yarn right now, so I don't have any need to buy more, but it's just nice to know. Especially, I feel like I've used a lot of different sock yarns, and I'm starting to kind of feel like I have my favorites, and when I find a new one that I wasn't really expecting to enjoy, that's always really fun. So for these guys, so you'll see I put them on needles again, like they're no longer on barber cords, which means that they will get finished. I'll admit that after kind of marathon knitting his version, I'm not exactly thrilled to work on more Viking motifs, so I'm gonna take a couple of days off, but I do really want to get these done. And so one thing I think I'm going to do, which is actually a recommendation I got a lot for one of my other languishing WIPs, is I think every morning I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna have my coffee and I'm just gonna do a few rows of these. And I'm gonna do them 2 at a time, because now that I know the size will work for me, I know how long I need to knit them to. And I think they'll move pretty quickly, but it's not something I'm in a rush to have, because I wasn't even expecting to have these socks for me. Like, these were always meant to be for Thomas, and now I've just got like a bonus pair of socks coming my way. So this is gonna be more of a leisure knit, get up, have my coffee, maybe watch a knitting podcast, and do a few rows on these and then put them back, which is very similar to what I do in December with the Advent self-striping socks. So it's a nice little routine that I can do in the morning. And then what I'm going to do once these are done is I'm actually going to do that for my Timberline cardigan, which is the project that I talked about at length last video that I was so unmotivated to work on, but that I really want to finish. So that's what I'm gonna do. I think that's just a really great way to work on projects that you're not motivated to, kind of make it a treat. I really appreciated some of the comments that were like, make it a special thing, like give yourself a treat for when you finish, or put it in a place that's really nice that you only go to work on, to where everything is spread out for you and you don't have to pull everything out each time. Have it very easy so you can just pick it up and mindlessly knit a couple of rows and then put it away, and it's not a big deal. And before you know it, you'll start making progress on it, and maybe you'll even get to a point where you enjoy working on it and maybe want to knit more than a couple of rows. I just really like the idea of that really low pressure knitting. And, you know, that will still be more progress than it's sitting in my bag in the bottom of my closet. So I'm actually quite excited to do that. So my plan is knock out the other Viking socks that way, and then slowly work through my Timberline cardigan. for Thomas, and that will one day be done. Yeah, so that is my only finished object for this week. My next item, it sadly doesn't have a ton of progress because of my marathon knitting these Viking socks. But there's, I guess, a little bit of progress since the last time we chatted about this. This is the Everyday Attitude tee by Susanne Sommer. If you don't remember, this is a summer tee that is started knitting, basically you knit each side flat. And so right now I am working on the back. You cast on at the neck, at the back neck, and then you just, it's garter stitch. So you knit every row, and then you do a series of increases that create this chevron effect that's going to go over the shoulder. And you get to a certain point, and then you actually put these like front flaps. So this is the back, if I didn't say. These little sides are kind of like the shoulder portions that will, I think, kind of carry over the front. Like that. And so then you put those little portions on hold. I've just got them on barber cords right now. And you continue working the back portion. And I just have a few more rows to work on the back, and then I'm actually going to start working the front flat. And I think I do the same length for the front flat, and then I will eventually join it in the round and work it all together. This is actually one of the few projects where it's really nice to be able to work flat because it's garter stitch. So that means I'm knitting every row. And actually once I join it in the round, it will slow down because I'm gonna have to purl every other row. So I am not in a rush to join it. And it's coming along, and I have to say I'm actually really enjoying the colors. If you saw previous episodes, you'll know that I was really unsure about the colors. I don't knit a lot of tops with really small stripes in them, so this is kind of scary for me. But yeah, especially like looking at it back here, I'm actually really enjoying it. So I'm looking forward to having this as a wearable garment. This pattern recommends using US 2.5 needles, which are 3mm, and I had to go all the way up to a US 5 or 3.75mm needle to get gauge. And what's interesting about that is that I am also using a thicker yarn. It recommends a light fingering yarn. I believe it's a linen yarn. I'm not entirely sure, I don't quite remember, but it's a light fingering is what they recommend. And I'm actually using a sport weight. I'm using Blue Sky Fibers Metallico, and it's, you know, I would say it's somewhere between a heavy fingering and a light sport. Like, it seems pretty accurate to a sport weight. So I found it really interesting that I had to go up so many needle sizes to get gauge. I don't know. Like, I would say I'm definitely more of a tight knitter than a loose knitter. I'm not a loose knitter at all, but I'm also not a super tight knitter. So I'm curious if a lot of people had issues getting gauge with this. But I'm really excited about how this is looking, and I'm happy with it. This is also a massive stash buster project for me. So that's part of why I had to do these stripes, was because I have all these random colors and not one of the colors had enough for me to have that be the dominant color outside of the white in between. So I just used all of them with the exception of the yellow. And I think omitting the yellow really made a difference in how this looks. And it looks really nice. I'm really excited for it. So yeah, the content of this Metallico yarn, it is alpaca and silk. And it's really nice. You know, it's interesting because those are two almost opposite kind of fibers in a way. When you think about what you'd want to wear, like alpaca, you typically think like that's a pretty warm fiber, and then silk is something that you might want to wear when you want to be cooler, like wear it on a warm day. But I think the two together make something that's really soft, really drapey, and it's still, I think this yarn works really well at looser open gauges. And I think when you do that in general, it's going to feel like a cooler garment, like it's not going to be super hot. And again, for me in the Seattle area, that's really fine for me to wear most of the summer, and it's not a problem. So I can't wait to actually make a little bit more progress on this. Now that the socks are done, I can kind of pick this back up as my main project. And hopefully next week, we can chat about this and it will look a little bit more like a real garment, not just a big piece of fabric. So yeah, that's this guy done. I know I mentioned this last week, or I guess a couple of weeks ago. I have started working through another design of mine for the Blue Sky Maker program. So I am working on a cowl, and it's almost at a point where I want to share it, but it's still kind of early, and you know, it's a color work cowl, so like trying to show it right now, I'm like unfolding it and it looks kind of weird, and so I want to get a little bit more progress on that, but I'm thinking in the next week or two I'll be able to show that as well. There's only one other thing that I can chat about, and this is kind of exciting. I'm kind of getting this ready for Flock, not to wear to Flock, but because there are things I want to buy at Flock that will work for this, and that is, if I can get it untangled. Okay. The very beginnings of my field day cardigan redo. Yeah, you might know if you've watched this podcast that I had almost finished the field day cardigan. I was halfway through the body. I had done two of the 4 buttons or something like that. I had gotten really close and finally got to a point where I admitted to myself that it was just too big. I knew I hadn't met gauge, but I thought it would be okay. But the more I knit, the bigger it looked, the more I was unsure that I was going to like it. So after some very deep denial, I ripped it out, put it away for a little bit, and right before I actually started working on these Viking socks, I decided to go ahead and just try and, you know, get some movement on it again. So again, this doesn't have much to show right now either, but this is the back portion of the Field Day cardigan by Ozetta. It's a top-down drop shoulder cardigan, and I am now knitting the smallest size, which is size 1. Before I was knitting size 2, and just with my gauge issues, there's just no way. So this is size 1. The pattern calls for US 7 or 4.5 millimeter needles, and I am using US 6 or 4 millimeter needles. And I am using Hazel Knit's Lively DK in the colorway Shanty Pants, and you know how much I love this color, and I'm so excited to be able to have this cardigan. So I just wanted to kind of get this back on the needles and on my brain, because Flock Fiber Festival is happening really soon. It's in like a week and a half now, and I'm thinking that I might be able to find some great buttons for this while I'm there. I've mentioned before that there's not really a lot of places near me that have buttons outside of like Joann Fabrics, and I really just want some cool buttons that will go with this. I want something that's kind of fun. I don't really know what yet. And I'm just really excited to see all the buttons and maybe have some ideas that I can grab there. So yeah, just kind of like seeing this, I'm excited for it. It's back on the needles. It will also be worked on a little bit. I have to say, this is kind of crazy. Like, I am not used to having this many projects on my needles at one time. I'm normally like 1 or 2 projects at most, but part of it is, I think, the excitement of Flock. Like this summer top was because I was thinking, well, maybe I can finish one more summer tee before Flock that I can wear to Flock. And then, you know, of course that didn't work out for a number of reasons. And then, you know, randomly I decided to marathon knit a pair of colorwork socks in a week. And so just like, I don't know, all these things happen. And now because of my Languishing Whips video, now I've got that other pair of Viking socks that I want to finish for myself, and then I know I need to get that Timberline cardigan done at some point. So there's a lot, but what's nice is I'm not actually in a rush for really any of it. Like, even if I don't finish the summer top for this summer, like, I'll probably actually wear it through the fall, so it's not a big deal. This cardigan will be something I will probably wear year round, because cardigans, you know, I actually wear a lot indoors in the summer if there's AC. And, you know, especially out here, it gets cooler in the evenings or in the mornings, so cardigans kind of get worn year round. So we'll see what progress I make next. I'm kind of excited about a few things. And so I think I'm just gonna need to kind of rotate based on my mood what I want to work on. But yeah, so that kind of is it for my knitting content today. It's been kind of different the last few days, like I said. So we took a few days off of work for Thomas's birthday, and yeah, like outside of me just trying to get through these socks, I haven't had a ton of time for knitting, just because we've been going out, we've been doing things, we've been going out and like hiking, going to get good food, and yeah, so we'll see if I can kind of like get some more knitting time and maybe make some progress on this this summer tee. So the next segment that I'm going to chat about, if you are interested, is the books I've been reading. I actually, in between doing all of this, I started and finished a new book called Attached at the Hip by Christina Riccio. This was actually recommended to me because I liked the book Everyone is Watching by Heather Gudenkauf. And I'm really happy that somebody recommended this book, because I really enjoyed it and I read it really quickly. The reason it was recommended is because it's also another story that kind of takes place on like a reality game show, which who knew I enjoyed reading books about that kind of stuff. I don't really watch a lot of shows like that, but so the main character, Ori, she's kind of stuck in what she wants to do with her life, and so kind of on a whim, she applies to be on the next season of Survivor. She ends up getting cast, but is told that it might be a little bit different. Turns out it's like a romantic spin-off of Survivor, and she ends up getting, you know, meeting some people she wasn't expecting, and, you know, it's like, it's a little bit of a romantic storyline, but it's mostly like how she navigates the game of Survivor, and, you know, while also learning about herself and figuring out what she wants to do with her life. So it's very lighthearted, very fun. I enjoyed it. It was a great read. I would definitely recommend it, especially if you're into that sort of thing. I have to say that actually, since finishing it, I decided to start watching Survivor, because I remember that like the first couple of seasons I had actually watched Survivor like when they came out a million years ago, and then, you know, I didn't after a while, but like just reading it, it made me really intrigued to kind of want to watch it. And it turns out that like super old episodes of Survivor are really great background for knitting. And fun fact is that there are like 46 seasons, which, oh my God, who knew? But yeah, so there's like a ton of content for you to knit to, and it's something where you don't really have to be like watching. You can just kind of like, you know, sort of pay attention while you're knitting, and I just think it's really great background content to have. Like, there's something about reality TV game shows where it's a little bit less, you really don't have to pay that much attention, like, it's not that serious, you know? So I think it's kind of perfect for knitting too. And I guess I have these books to thank for me being curious to actually see them. So like I said, I finished that book and really enjoyed it. And so I just finished it and started a new book last night. So the book I just started is called Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. And I don't really know much about it. Like I said, I don't really read synopses. It was just kind of in my queue, and so I just started reading it. But as far as I know, I think it's going to be sort of a rom-com type story, but it's like two doctors that are just meeting, that have to work together, that are both going through their own sort of like life crisis. And so they keep meeting each other at kind of like the worst versions of themselves. And yeah, so far they hate each other. But I expect at some point they will probably not hate each other so much, but we'll see. So nothing I can really comment on that, but so far I'm enjoying it, I guess. Like I'm like a chapter or two in. And the next segment that I'll talk about is podcasts that I enjoy. So I said a few episodes back that I wanted to kind of share. Actually, somebody asked me what podcasts I liked, and I realized there were so many I couldn't share just on one episode. So I decided that I'm going to share a few at the end of each episode, just kind of ones I recommend or ones I'm enjoying. And so this week I've got 3 that I want to chat about. The first one is called Mel Makes Stuff. And she's had a podcast for quite a while now, but it's a very irregular podcast. Her name is Melissa, and she's mostly a knitter, but she also does a lot of sewing. And I think she does a few other crafts every now and then, but it's really mostly knitting and sewing. And what I really like about her videos is that she basically modifies everything she works on to fit, because she talks about how she wants things to fit differently than how they normally do, just based on her body type. And she goes really in depth with all of the different modifications she's making and why she's making them. And she'll walk you through the whole process, and it'll be a much more in-depth video about a certain project. So she's not necessarily doing like a weekly or even a monthly podcast. It's just like when she has enough content of stuff she's been working on, she'll put up a video, and it'll just be really, really interesting content. One thing I've been enjoying that she's doing right now is she's working on a lot of like Japanese knitting patterns where she doesn't really speak the language, but she's trying to work off of the charts and use a little bit of the knowledge she has about the language to kind of piece together what to do. And there are some really cool patterns that she's been showing. Like she had one book where it was a knitting pattern book, but there was also a lot of crochet on it. Like I think she had one where it was a granny square top, but it had knitted sleeves. And she was talking about how she's seen a lot of Japanese patterns that use both knitting and crochet. And I found that to be I'd never really thought about combining the two in a pattern and how nicely those two work together. And it just kind of really inspired me in a way to where I'd never thought about that technique, and how I guess it's quite common in Japanese knitting design. So that's really cool. And that was just something I learned by watching her podcast, and I really appreciate that. So yeah, if you haven't seen her podcast, you should definitely check that out. Like it's just a wealth of knowledge with her, and it's really great. The next one I want to talk about is called Mostly Knitting, and her name is Tash, and she is a high school math teacher in Sydney, Australia, but she also teaches knitting classes. And I actually just discovered her not too long ago, and her podcast is great. Like she cranks out so many projects, and what she's working on is really beautiful. And I really love the color choices she makes. She talks about knitting through stash, and she's got some really beautiful patterns that she's working on, and she talks through the techniques that she's doing as well. And she's just very knowledgeable, and she's got a great podcast, so check her out. And then the last one I want to talk about is Espace Tricot. So this is one, I guess they've been on for a couple of years now, and essentially this is Stephanie and Naomi. They took over the local yarn store Espace Tricot in Montreal in Canada a couple of years back. And since taking it over, they decided to also take over the podcast and, kind of just not rebrand it, but, redo things with their style and everything that they're focused on. And it's kind of cool. In some ways, it's almost like the dream is like 2 knitting besties who work together, come together to buy out a yarn shop when the owners want to retire, and they design patterns and they work on other people's patterns, and they get to travel and do all these different events, and it's like the dream, right? And I really like that they both design, but they have very different design sensibilities. And I think it's really cool to see how they work together and the different styles that they come up with, and even how they'll take something and style it differently for themselves. And you can see how a garment can be styled two completely different ways. And they seem really fun and nice. And on top of that, they'll share, you know, shop updates about things they've got in stock. It is my dream to one day go to Espace Tricot in Montreal because that shop looks beautiful. And yeah, it's just, I always enjoy hearing what they're talking about. And it's a fun way to also see kind of like what's popular right now, what they're seeing in terms of trends of what people are buying and what's coming into stores, and yarn that people are really enjoying using. And they just seem really lovely. So that's, if you haven't heard of Espace Tricot, that's also a great one. They also, because they're both designers that work in a yarn store, typically their patterns are free because, you know, obviously they're promoting the pattern to, and they'll make kits with their yarn in store, which is really cool. And they have a lot of really great patterns. So definitely check them out as well. Other than that, yeah, I think that's going to do it for this week. So thank you so much for watching if you stuck around to the end. And I will see you next week. Oh, if you do want to get in touch with me, I am myWIP on Instagram and Ravelry. You can email me at myWIP@gmail.com, and then you can also find me at my blog, which is myWIPknits.com. So again, thank you for watching, and I will chat with you again next week. Bye.